What are the chances that I don't get kicked off Twitter and YouTube and Facebook just for talking?
Well, I think you have about a 10% chance, a good solid 10%.
10% getting kicked off or 10% staying?
No, 10% staying on. Actually,
I think by 10% that you predicted about staying on YouTube,
I think you're let me read this.
Open highway, restless nights, coffee houses, buzzing neon lights.
I think you have about a 10%, a good solid 10%.
Working my way coming back to
No, 10% staying on.
Working my way coming back. Take me home tonight, not wasting any time.
Let me read this.
Highway 95, engines on overdrive. From town to town, and in between, I see you in the morning light. New York, Boston, Philadelphia, LA, I still see your face. Buses roll, distance grows, but I remember you're just a dream away. Working my way, coming back to you. Working my way, coming back. Take me home tonight, not wasting any time. Highway 95, engines on overdrive. From town to town, and in between, I see you in the morning light. Light on as I drive on, singing our song. Keep the light on as I drive on, singing our song. Take me home tonight, not wasting any time. Highway 95, engines on overdrive. From town to town, and in between, I see you in the morning light. Take me home tonight, not wasting any time. Highway 95, engines on overdrive. From town to town, and in between, I see you in the morning light. Take me home tonight, not wasting any time. Highway 95, engines on overdrive. From town to town, and in between.
All right, guys, here Dave and the former president hijacked my show for a second there. All right, good. Yeah, welcome to What Are the Odds with Barnes and Baris. We're going to be playing that video and talking about it, but I'm your host, Rich Baris, one half of it. Robert will be joining us soon. Got a lot to get through today. If you guys looked at the topic sheet on Twitter, loads of stuff. All right, so let me, before Robert comes on here, we bring Robert in, let me go through the brief history of the first topic we're going to be talking about, all right, which is this report that came out, and we're a weekly show, so sometimes we got to go back and hit the stuff that was from last week or the end of last week, whatever it may be. All right, so this report from the Director of National Intelligence, praise John Ratcliffe, by the way, if you care about this stuff, all right, on UAPs, which is what the government refers to as, or commonly referred to as UFOs, Unidentified Aerial Phenomena. Why is this a topic for What Are the Odds? Well, because we can talk about whatever we want to talk about, but also the numbers are very, very interesting. All right. And let me give you guys a brief history here. Because a lot of people, the very first thing I hear is this because they're trying to distract us? Why would they be releasing this now? And if you know the history, then you know that that's really just not how this happened. this is actually rather organic. All right. And it is a mix of organic public pressure with the curiosities of elected powerful officials. Kicking the Department of Defense and the largely military industrial complex, kicking and screaming, dragging them, kicking and screaming. I wouldn't call it disclosure, but I would say new era of transparency. All right, so years and years ago, the very beginning of Harry Reid's tenure as being the most powerful man in the U.S. Senate, very early, he picks up the phone, he calls Senator Ted Stevens, a Republican senator from Alaska, former Republican senator from Alaska, who also had an interest in the phenomena. All right, I'm not going to get into his own personal experience. But he says, I need a partner on this. I want to get some dark money. I want to get some secret funding here. And I want to open up this program. Now, for those of you who know Harry Reid's background, he's friends with Bigelow, who's literally the head of Bigelow Aerospace and Engineering or whatever. And they are a treasure trove of conversations from people who are like the what do you want to call them? Ufologists? All right, whatever you want to call them. Ufologies? All right. And here, Robert is here, so while I'm working to bring him in, I'm going to keep talking here. But, so anyway, he knew Bigelow, and ufologists have been having a field day with this for a long, long time, right? Bigelow adds to that fire once in this 60-minute interview and just starts blabbing on about how he knows there's alien life, right? And all this other stuff. And ufologists had a field day with it because if it's like anybody who knows, like if there was a crashed Roswell incident in modern America, they would bring it to Bigelow, all right, to Richard Bigelow. And Harry Reid is his buddy. This is Robert's backyard. So I'm going to bring him in because this is your state. This is your senator, Robert. So I'm trying to give everybody a brief understanding of how this happened. And they pushed this forever. And, for years and years. And then Luis Elizondo, who's the guy who went on the History Channel and got the what is it called? Unidentified or something like that. It's just called Unidentified, a series. Luis first of all, he's a serious man. This is not a joker. This is a serious man. All right. For people who know anything about intelligence. And by the way, Chris Mellon, also a very serious guy. This guy is royalty in the intelligence community, Robert. It makes no sense for Mr. Mellon to come out and start talking about this crap. If you wanted more defense funding, there's a hell of a lot of better way to do it. Russia's new little weapon systems, the Chinese carrier killers. There is a lot easier way to convince senators to give the Defense Department and the military industrial complex more money. This was a protest, so Luis could not get it to Mattis, and I have some background on that, by the way. He knew Mattis for a while, respected the hell out of Mattis, but once Mattis got surrounded with the deep staters, he is a deep stater, but once he got surrounded by the deep staters that were trying to take out Trump, nobody could get a hold of this freaking guy, even friends. So Elizondo was very unhappy with the progress and the seriousness by which this issue is being taken because, he goes in there with an open mind, but I mean, he cleaned that program up. They were like investigating chupacabra sightings and crap for like the beginning of this program, and he focused it solely and centrally on UAPs. And this became a serious investigation. And the bottom line here is, folks, and I'm going to get Robert's take on it in a second, then we'll start reading from the report, but you can't ignore these numbers, Robert. What's your overall take on this? And we've been polling this because it's important. I want to know people's takes, but first, give me yours.
Yeah, I mean, I think a couple of things. People have thought that maybe this was a distraction campaign as to why now. My understanding is the same as yours, that this was because of some people who have very sincere interest in this, including the fact that Ratcliffe is the one who ordered a lot of this declassified before he left.
Yeah.
So he tried to get a lot of other stuff declassified. They fought him on China declassification. They fought him on election declassification. Trump sadly didn't go along on the, but then backed off of the Kennedy file the Kennedy file declassification, the Spygate declassification, the various aspects of 9/11 declassification. He got intimidated at the end from doing that. But this was one area where it did go through, and it went through because of conscientious people concerned that thought this information needed and should have been for a long time, particularly at post-Cold War, publicly available declassified information. So, a lot of this X-Files information is now finally come out because of the work of Ratcliffe and sort of good people within the system, the people that you're mentioning as well. who, you look at the data in the report, and it confirms what a lot of people have reported over the decades, which is there have been unidentified flying objects that the military could not rule out as being foreign origin. And by foreign, they don't mean other countries. So the foreign to the planet. In fact, what they did rule out is that it was kind of man-made in many contexts, at least man-made by any government they were aware of. And so then it becomes very curious. And I was always an X-Files fan, but I haven't gone deep into a lot of the terminology or studies, so I can't claim to be anywhere near even a quasi-expert on the subject. You know a lot more about it than I do. But I think the people who think that this is disinformation, I don't think that's the case. This is information they've long had, that conscientious people wanted to get out, that there wasn't enough pushback to prevent from coming out, number one. And then number two, the information in the report confirms what a lot of ordinary people have been saying for a long time, and provides more confirming evidence than refuting evidence as to the existence of unidentified flying objects that are not located, that cannot be explained in current modern human technology.
Yeah,
and that goes. I mean, the polling information is great on this too. So I think it supports what people were reporting in your polling.
Yeah, let me just read a couple things that I pulled out of this, right? So first of all, the data set described in this report is currently limited primarily, because this is a prelim report, currently limited primarily to U.S. government reporting of incidents occurring from November 2004, the tic-tac, right, to March 2021. Data continues to be collected and analyzed. And that's important, that sentence right there, because that also further validates Luis's claim, which is that I left the program, yes, to force this footage out, but I didn't try to sabotage the program. In fact, it's my understanding, he says, that it is not only ongoing, it has expanded. All right, and that there are more and more incidents. Now, we saw the Navy, and Tucker covered this when it happened. The Navy changed. Their rules used to be shunned. If you look, I was in the military. You go out and say you see lights in the sky, man, you're getting a Section 8. All right, you're gonna be clingered out of the military. All right, or what you're gonna get what Klinger wanted to get in MASH, man. That's gonna happen. And I will tell people. I do know about this stuff because, number one, we've been polling it for years. And this poll that we did, 4 months ago, 4 months ago, this is important because this is the first time we've ever, and not only us, but Gallup, we worded our question very similar because Gallup had a very long track record with these questions. We worded it similar to try to compare it in case Gallup abandoned it, which they generally, they've not done it as often as they have in the past. And we asked whether or not people think that these are human or natural phenomena, or whether at least some of them, is how we word it, at least some can be attributed to legitimate visitations from something from another world, and not from planet Earth. This is the first time those who said they're legitimate visitations outnumbered those who said that they were natural phenomena. And it wasn't by much, but it's a big shift compared to past polling. So as a pollster, Robert, there's no other explanation. ATIP did this. Shifted public opinion, got it out of the realm of the old X-Files kind of 90s genre, right, into the realm mainstream, and basically almost mainstream. There's a big chunk of unknown, I don't know, right? I don't know, unsure, I don't know. There's a big chunk of that, or just flat no opinion. But we have those other questions we ask to see whether or not people are full of crap. So do you believe there are extraterrestrial intelligence somewhere not on Earth? Do you believe the government knows more about it? Which strikes me, by the way, looking at this report, the interview Tucker did with former President Trump. And he said that he just thought Trump was full of it. He was lying. He's like, look, Trump, the media says he's a liar, but he doesn't really lie about big things. And when he does, you can see, because it's unnatural to him. Like, it doesn't look, he's so used to just shooting from the hip. When he's trying to parse words about something, it just doesn't work. And Tucker was like, it's my journalistic opinion. He's full of crap. He knows more. So it is a lot, that for people who don't know the ufology community, John Podesta, Clinton's former chair, and Hillary herself, they were promising disclosure to all these people. Hillary literally said, I will march in the Defense Department and make them do it. Yeah, okay. right? So that would never have happened. All right, and the Clintons, you remember and I remember. We remember another Clinton promising disclosure too. And instead, he reaffirmed Blue Book and made a fool of himself. I mean, so it was nothing. But all of these cases, 144, out of 144 cases, they were only able to, not definitively, but with a high degree of confidence, they say, they were only able to explain one. The rest are unexplained phenomena. These are people, and I've urged the viewers who are like, oh, come on, guys. Look, these are people, and you just heard one go over my head right now because we're by a military base. These guys and girls know what are in the skies, folks. They know what's supposed to be up there and what's not supposed to be up there. And when they say this thing doesn't have any propulsion signature, this has no, no surface areas for lift, this moves in erratic behavior with G-forces that would squish a human being, we just can't make turns like this. We can't make maneuvers the way these things make maneuvers. So when it's worth taking these people seriously. And now a government report, it's saying there are probably multiple types of UAP requiring different explanations based on the range of appearances and behaviors described in the available reporting. All right, but basically, these things can travel through space, water, air. I mean, there's a word Luis uses. It's I can't remember something terrain, something to describe that really there's no terrain they can't go through. It takes a lot for the military to classify something as a UAP. They have to go through all of these. It's not just like an average citizen who says, I just saw a light. That's not what we're talking about here. These are pilots who say this thing did a 180 doing ungodly speed, and we can't do that. It's just not possible. So what are your thoughts on this, Rob? What do you personally think? I mean, I know it's crazy and to get out there, but these things could be unmanned. We don't know. We don't know.
The way I see it is twofold. Just from a logic experiment perspective,
yeah,
it makes more sense that there is life elsewhere in the world than there isn't. So, just from a logical perspective, people that have gone through and done the sort of philosophical a priori kind of approach, the more logical, the idea that the only life in the world in this incredible galaxy is on one planet. That's not really the most logical explanation. So, that's part one. And then part two is if either our government knew something or foreign societies knew something, how would we, if we were trying to figure out if there was life on, how would we approach it? If we saw there was life on another planet, would we just go barging in? Right. Or would we explore? Would we try to keep a low footprint and not be seen, not be identified? In all likelihood, especially the way our governments operate, that's how they're likely to do. They're not likely. Columbus thought nobody was there. He thought he'd landed in India. That's why he reacted the way he did. That isn't necessarily how we would react today in a foreign land where we don't know the local population. We don't know the local map. We don't know the local geography. We don't know the local society. In that area, we would explore and get data. Number one. And number two, we wouldn't ourselves, we wouldn't let that our science exploration, we wouldn't share with the world. We would keep that secret to ourselves because that's the nature of our governments and societies. Clearly there are billionaires that believe that there's the capacity of life outside of our own, either in the form of life elsewhere or in the ability to establish human life elsewhere, or they wouldn't be obsessed with space. You look at these mega billionaires, real powerful people, Richard Branson, Jeff Bezos, Elon Musk, what are they all obsessed with? They're all, George Soros and Bill Gates want to run the world here, but other than those guys, those guys want to go, they're obsessed with space. So they think there's something up there that has capacity to sustain life. And if it has the capacity to sustain human life, why wouldn't it have the capacity to sustain other life or even human-like life? So I've always thought that that's the more logical explanation, and that we would not expect people to just come and introduce themselves. We would not, because that's not how we would likely engage a foreign world we don't understand and don't know.
Plus, if you were looking at us
we
from
go
afar,
now. Say it again.
If you were a superior species, or at least technologically superior,
Oh, yeah.
And you were looking at us from a distance and observing from outside, right? Would you want to interact with us?
That's funny.
Right?
Well, I often tell my nephews that we're probably aliens, and that explains our superior brain power, compared to the rest of humanity. But I had some clients who thought that they were, that they had some. That's a whole nother story. So that they thought, certain words in the tax laws really applied to them. Because non-resident alien, for example, things like that.
Oh, Lord.
I was like, I'm not sure that's what they meant, but okay. But some fascinating stuff when you get into it. I mean, Rogan, of course, Joe Rogan likes this topic in particular, and he's had some really interesting cross section of guests. The behavior panel has done some cross-examination of UFO stories, some credible, some more credible than others. But you dig into
Eric,
the files.
I'll do one of those, Eric. I'll share it with you. I'll just say this right now because I've had so many people from, smaller interviews to bigger interviews who have heard, I've talked to you about this, but I'm not going to blast this with everybody. I'll do it with Eric. And here's why I'll do it. Because he'll be able to take it to somebody and say, well, what do you think? So it will legitimize whatever comes out of my mouth because I know. But this way, it'll add some credence to it. Eric, I'll do it with you, buddy, if you're watching.
Yeah, this report clearly does. I mean, 143 out of 144 fully investigated by the government, and they can't say that where it came from. They can't identify it. Because for so long there was such a dismissive approach.
Yeah.
Say, oh, this is just bad photography. This is just made up. These are just. These are all Cartman from South Park talking about there's nothing coming out of his rear. They're that kind of, that was the pitch done. And there was, especially over the last decade and a half, because during the 90s, the X-Files really popularized and legitimated this theory. And I would always say that it was really a Gen X, the Gen X population was the biggest group that was into this subject matter, that was willing to entertain the possibilities of this in ways that the older generations were more skeptical of. And that to some degree, the younger generations had become more skeptical of until Rogan introduced a lot of people, but particularly this report, because this report completely refutes the media gaslighting that these are all bogus stories that have no merit, that are just made up by delusional people and so on and so forth. This is the United States government investigating 144 incidents involving, like you mentioned, many of these people are people who know what they're talking about. Yeah. They're Air Force pilots. They're Navy pilots. They're like, that doesn't make sense. They're people that are trained to understand what is in the sky, to be able to make fine distinctions. The kind of fine distinctions the Brits pretended they weren't making when they were going next to Crimea last week. They're like, oh, really? That's Crimea? Is that a Russian ship? That's a Russian plane? We had no idea. Yeah, we just stumbled into this. Trying to create a false flag staged event as one last gasp for that pitiful president of Ukraine. And the Brits are going to come to the world. Somebody's got to let the Brits know you lost your empire a century ago.
100 years ago.
Bye-bye. Quit pretending you're the Brits are going to take on the Ruskies. I don't think so.
Not going to happen.
They'll all be speaking Russian in a month. It's like when we were talking about the French. What would happen if there was a French Civil War? The question is, which side would raise the white flag first? Yeah. Because that's the French history. These are places that only exist today because of the United States of America. The Brits and the French should just get used to saying thank you to America every year for the last century, not trying to start new stupid wars in new dumb places. For a president look at how pitiful that Ukrainian president is. After he's begging, hey, come in and intervene, cover up for my corruption. Let's wage a civil war. Maybe let's trigger World War III. He doesn't get what he wants from the U.S. Then his British, the British, cockneyed scheme fails and backfires as the Russians make clear, we'll just bomb you out of the water if you keep hanging around. And then all of a sudden they turn around and get going. And if anybody doesn't think that was meant to be a staged event, why was a BBC reporter on a military
sitting
ship
right there
that accidentally went into the wrong waters? In terms of, but they might have tried to pretend. Boris Johnson did initially pretend that was unidentified flying object. But no, that was a Russian. Those are Russian planes because they actually filmed it, of course, and broadcast it for the world to see. But and then what does Zelensky do? He gets so ticked he sides with the Chinese yesterday. He sides with China against the United States and the United Nations. Well, what a bum. What a punk. This is the idiot, the Obama regime, this whole regime. He's the second version of it, but that put in 2014, the Maiden Revolution. But I think, to wrap up on the that was just a quick bridge on the Ukrainian nonsense and the Brits acting crazy. Right. But the UFO component, this report confirms what those UFO believers have claimed for decades now, that there are unidentified flying objects that sophisticated people cannot rule out, and most likely do have the most likely explanation. Just looking at the logic, is that these are not Earth made.
Yeah, let me just add to that. So they appear to remain stationary in winds aloft, move against the wind, maneuver abruptly, or move at considerable speed without discernible means of propulsion. In a small number of cases, military aircraft systems process radio frequency, RF energy, associated with UAP sightings. All right, and they'll go on, and really, if I would urge you to listen to Luis Elizondo, because he basically wrote the book they're going on with what even begins to get classified as one of these folks. So it's not the light in the sky. This thing was doing something already extraordinary. And by the way, one of those pilots said they saw him every day. Almost every day on the way to Iraq. Almost every single day. Going with the aircraft carrier fleet. And I'll tell you, I mean, when the government, like you said, really this is not... And Luis put it best himself. He said, look, we're beyond that, when he went on 60 Minutes. Like, so what are you telling us? These things are real? And he said, look, stop it. We're beyond that now. Now it's a matter of what the hell are they and what do they want, right? So what we have to... And right here in this report shares that view. They clearly pose a safety of flight issue and obviously a challenge to U.S. national security. So now when you hear the government making statements like that, Robert, they're like, oh. And if, by the way, if this is what every ufologist wants, then this will be the issue where the government really doesn't know, like there is no Majestic 12 or whatever that secret group is, right? If that's true, and these things turn out to be legitimate visitations like this is the biggest dereliction of duty ever in the history of governments, ever in the history. So you have... Well,
and that's why I assume, the X-Files interpretation of events, without going to the full place the X-Files goes, is a more probable explanation of how governments operate than the idea they didn't further investigate this in other capacities. So is my interpretation. And what they released, what they've disclosed, is all of these identifications that were made by third parties, those people outside of, say, elite positions of power, that they had to deal with at some point, and now they've at least, and the white hat actors got it divulged to the world. But you couldn't rule out the possibility of some degree of contact or communication. I mean, there's no way any government in the world would want that publicly disclosed. They would keep that secret no matter what. It's just the nature of governments. I mean, look at all the great lengths they're going to keep Julian Assange in prison based on secrets that have already been outed over a decade ago. And so if they're willing to go to that great a length, including perjured testimony from pedophiles and fraudsters who are informants acting as unindicted co-conspirators, even though the National Review told everybody that can't possibly happen. Well, it did again. It happened, of course, the Chicago 7 trial, happened in the Whitmer so-called kidnapping trial, which is really the Whitmer FBI entrapment trial. There's even a great meme out there with little Pepe and two big FBI sort of lizards saying, "Come on, Pepe, do a little domestic terrorism." Because of that's do it for us. That's really what's sort of taking place. But that gives you an idea of the scale of it. I mean, they're willing. They don't want anyone ever to be another Julian Assange. And they're willing to torture him, as they have been doing for the last several years in order to do so. Lie in court in ways that became, rather easy for the journalists to document. The Icelandic reporter who proved all of this, what you had was a pedophile who was a career fraudster, serial criminal, who all of the statements made about what he gave and provided at the instructions of Assange were completely false in the second superseding indictment. And it turns out he was acting criminally and trying to hack organizations and individuals and institutions in the West, not at the request of Julian Assange, but at the request of the Federal Bureau of Investigation. And they covered it all up under a wide range of lies to the Icelandic authorities, then lies to the grand jury, then lies to the British courts. They're willing to lie to 3 governments in order to do this. So if they're willing to do that over some State Department cables and some Iraq war embarrassments, what do you think they would do to protect secrets of knowledge of an alien civilization? I mean, that's just who these people are. They think in terms of power, and they think the power. This is what Julian Assange unlocked. He said the key to the abuse of power is secrecy. Remove secrecy, you remove the capacity for the abuse of power, and that's why they hate him so much. But I can't rule out the possibility that governments somewhere in the world are aware of some degree of information and knowledge they haven't shared. I mean, I've spoken to very high-ranking people who absolutely believe some of that contact and communication has occurred. And they're not the kind of people to believe it without some evidentiary foundation that they couldn't disclose or divulge to me because of classification.
Yeah, I heard the craziest story, and it sounds crazy. Nixon is gone now. There's no way to ask him whether it's true or not, but Steven Spielberg is still alive. I mean, I don't know if people who know the story I'm referring to. But
remember the British Prime Minister they pushed out? I think it was like crazy. Harry something another. Not British, but it says in the early 70s.
In Canada. Wasn't it Canada? I think.
No, it was the United Kingdom, because I got the whole tour when I was in London.
Sorry.
I had never heard the backstory. They just said he went crazy. It turned out what he was claiming was that the government knew of alien contacts, that the British government knew about it, that these were some of the issues, and that he had decided to disclose it to the world. And instead, they labeled him nuts and removed him from power. He was the prime minister. I never knew this story until I got a high-end British tour guide in London a few years ago. And I was like, wow. And then I researched it and found that there was evidence of this, but that they had buried it and made him sound like a nut job. So it wouldn't surprise me at all.
Yeah, discrediting is definitely the playbook. I mean, it makes sense. It's what they do on everything else. So why on earth wouldn't they do it with this? Yes. But at this point, this isn't. What I like about this story in general is that this is a rare example of information coming to light, and the attempts to censor and suppress didn't work. Where the organic push and the actions of a handful of people who could make a difference, could do something, really did make a difference, and that's very different than what we're seeing generally in the world right now, Robert. That's a great way to segment into Dave's interview, which hijacked the part. I don't know how that happened, but it hijacked the intro to the speech. But you know what? It was good. It was a preview of what's to come. But Dave Rubin interviewed former President Donald Trump, and this is 27 seconds.
And if you want the whole uncensored interview, you can get it at his on his RubinReport.locals.com page. It was a great. I was just going to bridge that in. Go ahead.
Yeah, no. If you're on Locals and you're not a member of Dave's community, then you're wrong. I mean, it's he's the singularity to it, I guess you would say. So he's got a lot going on in that page, as evident by this interview. So 27 seconds. Let's run it. Listen to what the president is saying and Dave's reaction. And we kind of joke about it now, but it's not funny. And then we'll talk more about it.
I don't get kicked off Twitter and YouTube and Facebook just for talking to you.
Oh, I think you have about a 10% chance, a good solid 10%.
10% getting kicked off or 10% staying?
No, 10% staying on, actually. It's...
Yeah.
I
think my 10% that you predicted about staying on YouTube may have just dropped to 5%. But
let me reduce it. Yeah.
Bear with me, folks.
What are the chances that I don't get kicked off Twitter and YouTube and Facebook just for talking to you?
Oh, I think you have about a 10% chance, a good solid 10%.
10% getting kicked off or 10% staying?
No, 10% staying on, actually. It's...
Yeah, I think my 10% that you predicted about staying on YouTube may have just dropped to 5%. But
let me reduce it. Yeah.
What are the chances?
That's funny stuff, but it's not because it's actually true. And now, even for those left wingers, Robert, who didn't think this was an important issue or something, right? Look what happened to Right Wing Watch today. All right, this is a group that dedicated themselves to getting rid of voices on the right they didn't like. Now, some people I couldn't give a hoot about, but it's not a matter of my personal opinion. It's their ability and their First Amendment right. And it's so much more than that. It's about our collective right to question authority and so-called consensus, right? And the minute you do that, you're shut down. Right Wing Watch made it its job to get rid of people who did that. And they said it was, anti-bigotry, anti-discrimination, basically your general run-of-the-mill SPLC grift. And, that obviously was not true. Do you know what it was exactly they were removed for? I mean, I'm open to hearing something they may have done that was actually wrong. But once in a while, lefties, they're going to throw one of you on the chopping block. Just so they can say that it's not just exclusively going after people who oppose one ideology. So once in a while, you'll get on the block too. And here's a perfect example.
Yeah, I mean, no doubt. I mean, I think that, so a couple of things. One, in terms of Rubin's interview, great interview by Rubin. Trump was much more natural in that interview than I've heard him in a very long time.
Indeed.
He was laid back. He got a kick out of things. He found it engaging, and he was more revelatory, sometimes accidentally so. Like I had been, the tea leaves that had been coming out was that, and the message Trump had been sending out was that maybe he would not run in 2024. But what he gave away to Rubin when he says, oh, it's a little bit early, and then he catches himself and stops talking and shifts gears, tells me that his Save America thing right now, Trump is planning on running in 2024, that he's changed, he's moved back into that space mentally. And that's probably not a bad decision on his part in the sense that what he does best is run for office, his campaign, is be the PR guy. He's not, he's not the best organizer. He's not the architect. He's not the engineer. He's the marketer. And so probably other people have to help form the architecture. Other people have to form the engineering organizations. And let Trump just be and then feed him the information so that he can market populism effectively. But I highly recommend the Rubin interview on his locals page. It's the uncensored version because he had to censor the version on YouTube for it to stay up, where Trump talks about what happens in the elections as well on the locals version. So, but yeah, great interview, very insightful, very revelatory, and especially that two things: Trump is in very good spirits. He's still the same Trump. So all these stories about rage, anger, depression, as usual, are completely false.
BS. Yeah.
Total BS. And the second is that, all the stories about, he thinks he's going to be back in office and all that, totally made up. That's not true at all. But
Charles Cook confirmed it with his array of sources that he spoke to. Array of sources. So it's like one unnamed anonymous source confirming another unnamed anonymous source.
It's talking to Bill Kristol's cocktail circle.
Yeah, that's right.
That's all that was. Totally fake. You can see that.
Total garbage.
But I think Trump is serious about 2024. He may change his mind. But like when he said, hey, it's kind of early to do these rallies. And it's like, what do you mean early? And he himself caught himself. And all of a sudden he shifts gears. He does this occasionally. I mean, I've watched Trump tons. He'll occasionally slip up and disclose something that he doesn't want out there. It shows that there's a lot more control behind the scenes than is seen from Trump. But he was also just revelatory. I mean, that the way Rubin asked questions sort of brought out Trump as Trump. And sort of the laughing Trump, the funny Trump, the comedic Trump, not just because I don't think Trump's at his best when it's the bitter, angry, resentful.
Me either.
Trump.
Never did. I totally agree. I don't know why he didn't show people first for people who have followed Donald Trump for a while. That bitter Trump really isn't who he was, and it's just not.
And isn't who he really is. I mean, when I talked to him at the beginning of the election contest, he wasn't bitter, angry, resentful. Was just, he was more curious than anything else. He believes in revenge, but that's just a moral principle for him and a practical principle.
Sorry. I'm not always a great Christian, that's for sure. You know what? I'm not perfect. There was one, and by the way, I got a slew when we said we were going to do this. I got a slew of those people who were like, oh, well, how do you explain your God now? You know, well, who created them? That's how I explain it. You know, I mean, really, look.
Oh, well, I mean, you mean on the UFO thing?
Yeah. My
Yeah, well,
father's house has
why would
many
God
rooms,
limit himself
end
to
of
Earth?
story.
I've never
Right.
understood that. There's nothing in the Bible that says he limited himself to Earth.
Yeah, I think some of that is arrogant human,
Yes.
take. Because look, if he really is an all supreme being, deity, whatever, then he certainly would not have just made us.
Well, he created the whole universe. Why
Yeah.
did he create planets tens of thousands of miles away? Just for us to look at 10,000 years later, 10,000 light years later, whatever it is?
Yeah, I
I don't know.
agree.
Probably not.
Yep. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense. It just really doesn't. But yeah, generally though, that was yet another example where that did come to fruition again. It was information that was going to be squashed, or at least try to be squashed, and that gets us to Bill Barr. All right, because that was the talk that got them in trouble on that interview with you two. Bill Barr is so full of crap, it's not even funny. There are now emails. I mean, they're public, folks. You could read them if you want. Go to the Republican House Judiciary Committee, and you'll see them from Jim Jordan. All right, he tried reading them on there. The media just doesn't cover them because they're totally corrupt. But Mark Meadows is fielding accusations that are even in the form of signed affidavits. They're credible allegations. I mean, I would remind people of the total lack of credit that prior allegations have had. I'm thinking in 2004 of election theft, thievery, and I'm thinking 2016, right? All of these accusations that had no merit, no real even cohesive, no cohesive, it wasn't an argument that even made sense. So I don't understand. Okay, so how did Trump steal the election with Vladimir Putin, and how could he have done that when Obama just said it's impossible to do in a centralized fashion? It doesn't make any sense. And in 2004, Robert, they used garbage exit polls to try to argue it was statistically impossible for Bush to win Ohio. It was ridiculous. And the exit polls were wrong in half a dozen other states that year. They were horrible, those exit polls. I'm sure you remember. They were terrible. Florida was going to be close, remember? Kerry may win Virginia.
I know, because
That's
I
what
made
was going
money on
that
it.
night.
I made tons of money that
Of course you did.
but Bush was at 2-1.
He was
2-1
yeah.
at 7 p.m. Eastern time.
Tim
Because
Russert was popping the
the
champagne,
second
man.
round of exit polls came out, all predicted Kerry was going to win in a sweep. I had my system that said, no, I don't think that's what's going to happen. And so I bet tons of money, and I made 2-1 on my money in 6 hours. It was a beautiful, beautiful night. And I was not a W fan, but I was just a my money fan.
Money's
but
money.
But my entire premise was based on exit polls being worth crap. And because I'd figured that out in the 90s, because there was a Tennessee election that had some exit poll results, and I was like, that's clearly wrong. And because I learned from Kevin Phillips, start out with precinct data, look at like constituencies, look at the history of those precincts, and you'll get a sense for who's voting what and all the rest. And, you can do it at the county level, but ideally more granular precinct levels where you really get great
Without
data.
a doubt. Yeah.
And Kevin Phillips, Emerging Republican Majority, 1968, still a great book. It really awakened me to that. And I happened to read that book as a kid. So it informed how I looked at all of politics. I went back and looked at all the precinct data for my city, for different elections that I cared about. So so they had this exit poll come out that said African-American voters voted a certain way. And I was like, there's next to no chance of that. And because the precinct data didn't hold it up at all. And so then I knew, then I researched exit polls, found out why they're so unreliable. And then all I did was profit off of betting against exit polls.
If you're betting on a guy you want to win, then you have no business betting.
Well, remember 2016.
Yeah.
2016. The second round of exit polls, for people that don't know, they released exit polls from the people that voted in the morning.
It was a wipeout.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And then they released a second round from the people who vote in the afternoon, and then the final round for the people who vote in the evening. And they use their projections of what they think is going to happen so that they start predicting the election by the time the first round of exit poll results come in at noon. And by the second round, they really have, media always thinks that's the outcome. And the second round came in, I had buddies and pals and other people in the media texting me and emailing me. This was late by that point in Ireland, Dublin, where I was, saying, you need to get out of the market. Trump is done. He's finished. It's over. And I was like, no, I'm going to double down because these exit polls are historically wrong. And in fact, what their internals are showing me is exactly what I thought would happen, which means Trump's going to pull this baby out. And so, yeah, I've made money betting against exit polls for forever. These things are notoriously inaccurate.
And they used that. Barbara Boxer used that to object to the elect. By the way, that was supposedly treason this time around. They used it to object to the certification of the Electoral College vote. That's what I mean. If they had the numbers, they would have stopped him. They just didn't have the numbers.
Now, the machines in Ohio were owned by a Republican, but that was one of the reasons I voted for W.
I mean, that's
the reason why I didn't vote for him. The reason why I bet on him twice. I was like, in Florida, his brother is going to purge the rolls, and in 2004, his buddy owns the voting machine. You know, those Bushes. Who's gonna cheat better? You know, is usually a good standard for, you know, I probably should have applied that in 2020. But whoever is going to cheat better tends to win. It's like it used to be my stock market
Should
mechanism.
be a whole new model. It should be a whole new model, man.
In the late 90s, all I did for stock market
variable.
betting was I bet on the bigger crook. I was like, I would invest in whoever I thought was the nastiest, meanest crook. Made me a lot of money. You know, Bill Gates, Microsoft, Warren Buffett, Mr. Sweetheart loves his little ice cream cones or whatever. People should really study what old Warren is about. You know, why was he in 2009 getting together with Bill Gates and Oprah and Ted Turner and Bloomberg and Soros and Rockefeller to discuss the future of the world? What was old Warren doing? Was he just giving his little Nebraska mom and pop advice? Is that what he was at Rockefeller University in that secret meeting for? But for that, you'll have to watch Hush Hush at vivabarneslaw.locals.com. But so I think, I agree in terms of going further into this. Bill Barr is such. I do like Bill Barr called it bullshit, bullshit.
Yeah, and I'll call. Yeah, I'll put a tag in it or something.
Yeah,
but I'll get the email. I'll tell people what's not with the emails I'm talking about. But go ahead, finish
Absolutely.
what you're saying.
So, we'll use the phrase. Bill Barr's last name should have an S, and we'll just say BS. But what was nonsense was Bill Barr himself. What he claimed. Because here's a guy who was running around everybody. He's still bragging about it. Got his bribery after the fact with his lot of money, likely multi-million-dollar book deal. Who's going to be buying a book from Bill Barr? Nobody's buying a book from Bill Barr. There isn't millions of people out there willing to buy a book from Bill Barr. So that looks to me like just straight up bribery. Not that he needed it. For people who don't remember, Bill Barr's background.
This stuff's got to stop, man. These book deals, Robert, they are corrupt. They are, man.
Completely. And then you dig in, it's like when they want to talk about white privilege, well, maybe we should talk about Nazi privilege and look at some of these book publishers and other businesses that have grown rich off of Nazi wealth from the 1930s and 40s. And if you dig into maybe Barack Obama and Michelle Obama's book deal and one of the biggest money laundering bribe-oriented book publishers in the world, you might find some Nazi origins behind there. But it's amazing that the combinations there. But you look at what Barr's saying that he meaningfully investigated election fraud is itself a lie, complete and utter lie. I had gathered all kinds of information. Others of us that were part of the cases had gathered major information. Barr refused to investigate any of it. He didn't look at any of it. He is lying to the world when he says he did as much of an investigation to uncover what happened with the election as he did Epstein's death. And for people who don't know, the man who introduced Epstein and gave him his first job to the world was Bill Barr's dad. That's who did it. And Bill Barr's dad also wrote interesting books, science fiction books that tended to glamorize underage sexual abuse. Well, his dad was a major principal of a school that had a lot of underage girls in it. So, there might be a long head. Bill Barr's first break in government was covering up for MK Ultra and other illicit projects by the CIA when he was helping out the Bush family. That's who Bill Barr was.
Bush's guy. They were always the Bush guy, and that's an interesting
story.
That's an interesting story too. How he came to pick Bill Barr. I mean, he fell for that one too. I have to be honest. But there are now emails from Mark Meadows, at the time chief of staff, to Bill Barr and his right-hand man, and they're saying, "Look, here are specific instances we'd like you to investigate." They folks, when I tell you that Donald Trump didn't have, when Robert and I both tell you he didn't build an organization to implement his agenda and didn't fully have control of the government, here is a perfect example. So here he is, his chief of staff, sending an email to his attorney general and his right-hand man, asking him to investigate these specific, not general instances, specific instances of electioneering. And they flatly, the only response Mark Meadows got was that we are not responding to this. That's what so in other words, go, and that is what they were telling the president of the United States. I mean, essentially through the chief of staff. And this idea, like they're supposed to be independent. Let me tell you, you think Merrick Garland was independent, or do you think he got a call from the White House and decided that he was going to sue the state of Georgia? Do you think that he was independent, or he got a call from the White House when he decided to threaten the Attorney General of Arizona? This idea they're independent is a load of crap. They are in the executive branch, and the president runs the executive branch. There's not some Robert Mueller who can be a standalone above the law kind of figure. That was a 4-year lie that the media just completely fabricated and made up out of whole cloth. Whole cloth. They are not independent. They are subservient to the president, and that, by extension, subservient to you. Because you are the voter and you're supposed to be sovereign. Who you choose is the sovereign for the time, for the tenure. And the permanent government is supposed to be a public servant who carries out their agenda. End of story. That's why you'll never see me do that double standard stuff. You just won't see it. So he picked up the phone and called Merrick Garland and told Merrick Garland to investigate somebody. That's his job.
Yeah.
Yes, Mr. President.
Our remedy for that is at the polls or with
That's
elected
right.
officials through impeachment.
That's
That's
right.
the remedy. The remedy is not to create a permanent administrative state that is a functional dual state, that is a functional deep state.
Yep.
That is not our remedy. And so I have no problem with political. In fact, I believe in politicized cabinet officials because that shows democratic, little d, democratic control.
That's
the public,
right.
people's control.
It's the freaking point, Robert. It's the point. It's the whole point of this whole thing.
Absolutely. And you go to Bill Barr, probably no one man is more responsible for the outcome of 2020 than Bill Barr.
Yeah.
First, Bill Barr covered up Spygate by appointing Durham, who had previously covered up CIA torture in Guantanamo. So, I mean, it wasn't a coincidence. People kept talking about what he did in the 80s when they had to come clean about Whitey Bulger because it had already been outed. What they were not paying attention to is what Durham's real name to fame was, which was his ability to cover up CIA corruption, even when that CIA corruption involved spying on the United States Senate. That's part one. Part two,
Absolutely
first
right.
he completely covered up Spygate, made sure Klein Smith got a sweetheart deal, made sure they could go nowhere, gave immunity to a wide range of people, didn't even make a report, didn't even issue a report. Number two, while he talked a big game, and by the way, he was doing that while he was falsely leaking information.
Yes, he was.
Fox News, Sean Hannity, and that crowd who's yet to apologize for being taken for a ride.
Yeah, they were totally duped.
Andrew
They were totally
McCarthy, all these people out there yipping and you can know who they are because they're the same people trying to excuse FBI conduct related to January 6th. The same crowd, you know who their sources are by that fact. They did have official sources, but those official sources were using them to lie to Trump, to lead Trump to believe a report was
And it was all
imminent.
circular.
Indictments were imminent.
And it was all circular. All same misinformation, same sources pumping out that misinformation or disinformation, really, and then circular reporting on it. And that was, I mean, that is what the left-wing media does. That's what they did during Russiagate. That's why all of them were all wrong, even though they all seem to have the same source. Adam Schiff getting up to go to the bathroom in the middle of hearings, texting CNN, what's going on. I mean, that's why we call him bathroom leaker Schiff. That's why Junior was mocking him. How many times are you going to get up to go to the bathroom? That's where that came from, because he was actually doing that. And Maggie Haberman pretending.
Leaks were taking place while the committee was holding hearings.
Yeah, he's on
secret hearings. Leaks were on CNN. I mean that's why Schiff is so mad about finding out that his phone records were subpoenaed. Because he knows what those records will reveal. He had committed multiple crimes while he was the head of the Intelligence Committee. But that was just part one. Stage one, cover up for all of Spygate by Bill Barr, while misleading and lying to the world, including especially Trump, that something was imminent. Second, he's the guy who covered up everything related to Hunter Biden. He's the guy who ordered that there'd be no public disclosure, that there be no public report of the investigation. That was Bill Barr, the number one guy who covered up for the Biden corruption that should have been exposed, that was happening organically. No, it wasn't even a product of Trump ordering it or anything else. It was happening because a computer repairman had found this shocking laptop that had been abandoned in his shop that he took to the FBI because he didn't want to be blamed for what was on that laptop. Not just corruption, but you can put one and one together. Can't talk about it on YouTube. What would be on that laptop that would terrify that guy? So that's why he takes it in. Biden, I mean, it's Barr who rushes in to say, don't publish this. Don't disclose this. Keep this a complete secret. He covered up for the Biden family the way he spent a generation covering up for the Bush family. So that was big step number 2. And then big step number 3 was doing nothing before or after the election to deal with any of this extraordinary processes taking place in the election.
But running his big mouth, though, about it, about how much fraud there is with mail-in voting.
And it was the same game. He was doing the same scam of promising investigations, promoting investigations, saying all the risk was there, saying all the magic words for Trump, while in fact gutting it and making sure it didn't happen behind the scenes. And as I reported on this show right after the election, back right after January 6th, actually, because I had talked to people at a high-ranking position, which won't get into any more detail than already disclosed. But what happened was they found U.S. attorneys knew about people stuffing ballots, stuffing the drop boxes in certain states in the country, caught them doing it. The U.S. attorneys, one of whom was up to be a federal judge, so people can go do their Google and see what they can put together. That's on them. Found out about it. So it was a Democratic Party activist in a key contested state caught on film stuffing drop boxes. And I mean, there's supposed to be one person dropping off a ballot. No ballot harvesting was legal in this state. Putting in thousands and thousands of ballots into a drop box. And that prosecutor covered it up at the request of Bill Barr. And they found some people found out about it and made sure that prosecutor was withdrawn from becoming a federal judge. They withdrew his nomination but that's the scope. But it's not just that Barr failed to investigate or drew the wrong conclusions. Barr actively covered up the key corruption that relates to this election. Covered up Spygate, covered up Biden corruption, and covered up election irregularities. No one person is more and that's why he got the payoff he got at the end as just an extra carrot, an extra cherry on top of the corruption sundae. That he comes from a long family of corruption. Again, Dad introduced Jeffrey Epstein to the world. That's all you really need to know about Bill Barr. Bill Barr starts his career by covering up for the CIA. That's also all you need to really know about Bill Barr. The Bush family loved Bill Barr. That's also all you need to know. It should have been enough for a certain president to know that when people told him not to bring him in.
They used Poppy Bush lying in state to pull on Trump's heartstrings and get Bill Barr in that office, folks. Just so everybody understands what happened. That's how decent these people are.
And Barr was smart.
The death of a patriarch.
Barr wrote an essay about Mueller going too far that got Trump's attention that was meant to do that.
Yeah.
And Trump took the bait to hook, line, and sinker.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, in retrospect, but
also,
it's more than retrospect, because 2 months leading up into this thing, I'm shouting at the top of my lungs. You're shouting at the top of your lungs. People aren't listening. You could only put 2 and 2 together. It was final confirmation for me when I got a glimpse of the letter.
We're told not to criticize Trump's people, that they were secretly working for Trump. A lot of pressure was brought to not talk, because I had questions about Barr from right away because I knew about his history. But a lot of people said, if you want to be close at all to Trump world, don't go out and publicly attack Barr. So I didn't, and now I regret it. And that's what we occasionally get pushback from people saying, why are you saying anything bad about Trump? Because this was an area we made the mistake, or at least I made the mistake, of not talking about a lot earlier.
Yeah, being anti-shutdown, too, is another one, folks. If you were anti-shutdown, you got calls from everywhere. The hell are you talking about that on your podcast for? What the hell's wrong with you? Get on board. Stick to the program. What? I'm not in your program.
And it's clear. I mean, we've been hitting Barr, and Trump finally came out and hit Barr, which was great to see. We had exposed Jason Miller for who he is. Jason Miller is now gone from the Trump team. So, that's the only. There need to be more people pushing back so that Trump hears negative information when he's in a place of risk or danger. And Bill Barr was one of his greatest mistakes. But Bill Barr is a fraud. That's who Bill Barr is. He's a fraud. He's a lifetime as a fraud, and he did more to defraud the voters of an honest election than any other person in the entire country, in my view.
Well, I did get a phone call before he made that choice, and I got, basically, hey, I'm going to be talking to the president soon. What do you think? And I'm like, what the hell do you mean? Well, I think he's going to pick who he wants. Who do you think he should appoint as Attorney General? And I gave him two names, you and John Ratcliffe. That's it. I was like, there are no other choices. There are, and by the way, John Ratcliffe turned out to be solid because he was opposed.
Ratcliffe would have been fantastic. Would have been a no-nonsense guy. I even told people I supported putting Ted Cruz in that position.
Whoops.
Because Cruz wants to be a future president, and he would play it much smarter than Pence did.
Yeah, at least.
I mean, Cruz would have been happy to out the Biden family. Would have made his name to fame by doing so. So, there were certain places you could put Cruz that you could. There are certain places you couldn't, but there are certain places you could. And so that there were plenty of people he could, and the Senate might have voted for him to go to the Attorney General's office just because so many of them hate him in the Senate.
Yeah,
that they would just want him out of the Senate. Oh, okay, we'll give you.
Oh, yeah, I get you. I get your logic. Yeah, that's.
I mean, Cruz is really hated up there. He's still hated up
there.
Yeah, there's people that will just start shaking in anger about him.
Ever since the Obamacare shutdown.
Confirmation from this book. Now, two things in the book. One thing in the book is partially inaccurate. One part is fundamentally accurate. One part says that Rudy Giuliani got into a cussing argument with Justin Clark, the White House president's elections counsel, where Clark, about the issue about whether or not you could do a recount in Georgia prior to the certification of the vote. And in there, it says that Giuliani was yelling, Trump was on the phone, Giuliani was on the phone, Justin Clark was in the room, and yelling at Justin Clark that Clark was lying because Clark had been telling everybody, including the president, that it was not even possible to have any kind of recount prior to the actual certification by the Secretary of State of the election results. Now, and what Giuliani yelled on the phone is he said Clark is lying. In fact, you can get a recount before the certification and another recount after the certification. Well, what's interesting is in the book misleads people into believing that Clark's position was correct. Clark was completely lying. Now, the way I know about this was Rudy Giuliani was taking credit for what I did. That was entirely my idea, my process. The first thing I identified when I went down to Georgia was that, of course, you could get a recount prior to the certification. And there were actually multiple means by which you could do so, but it was explicit and expressed right in the statute. This gives you an idea of how corrupted Trump's election counsel, his corrupted insiders were, that they were saying something that was directly refuted by the statute. Now, what the book, the Wall Street Journal reporter, Mr. Big Inside Reporter, fails to tell people, at least in what I've seen so far, in the published reports in the Daily Mail and elsewhere of excerpts, one is he fails to tell people that that actually came from me. So he didn't do a good job on his sources. He clearly didn't have Rudy Giuliani as a source. He probably had, even if he had Justin Clark as a source, Justin Clark knew who that came from me. We had prior discussions on the phone on related matters. Clark was lying to the president. I didn't know that Rudy was taking credit for my ideas. That doesn't terribly shock me. That's part. It's Rudy being Rudy. God bless. And I see more why Trump thought Rudy knew a bunch of stuff. Rudy was busy taking credit for every good idea I or anybody else came up with. So Trump was thinking, oh, Rudy really knows election law. Rudy didn't have a clue about election law. He was just stealing ideas. And that's how he got caught later, because he kept taking ideas and then he started taking bad ideas from bad sources. And he didn't know how to draw the difference because he had no clue about election law. That now has him in trouble in New York, though I think those New York proceedings are totally bogus.
I was going to ask you about that. I mean, Robert, this
just
is
briefly.
Crazy.
Second thing about the reporting, though, by the way, so it was one that, aside from them covering up the what really happened. By the way, for anybody out there, just look it up. There was a recount done before the certification. That's how lazy the Wall Street Journal reporter was done. Clearly, Justin Clark lied because there was an actual recount done before the certification. But the second component that's confirmed in aspects of that book are what we were reporting, what we were talking about, what we were focusing on was in fact part of the election process. But what we talked about right after the election was that McConnell was organizing the establishment effort to get rid of Trump, and was meeting with Barr to try to get that done, meeting with others to try to get that done, had that lunatic theory in Georgia that if Trump would just concede, confess, admit he was bad, and then still campaign somehow this is McConnell's messed up mind. Trump will admit he's a bad person. Trump will concede. Trump will confess his bad actions. Trump will walk away politically, but Trump will come and still campaign for us and help us raise money. I mean, this is how stupid the turtle is. This guy is, I don't know what a turtle's IQ is, but the turtle's IQ has got to be less. It is bad. He's already a cold reptilian in his personality, but I didn't realize he was reptilian in his intelligence until reading that book.
Yeah, his IQ. Yeah, I'll tell you the second thing that I wanted to share too was that I know Matt Brainerd gave the FBI over evidence, and I know him and others that I had submitted some of our work to look at. Everybody was trying to double check.
Your work was submitted to them. Matt Brainer's work was submitted to them. Nevada's work was submitted to them. In the case that I talked about, where they actually had video footage. They had video footage of corruption in a key state, and Bill Barr suppressed it. So Bill Barr's a liar. Bill Barr's a fraud. Bill Barr's a disgrace.
How do you do an investigation? Forget about a thorough one. How do you conduct any investigation without picking up the phones and calling the sources of this information? I didn't get a single call. Honest to God, because my phone was ringing like crazy after the election. Yours was too. I really thought any second now one of these was going to be the FBI saying, hey, can we talk to you about this work? Not a single damn call. Not one. So how could you possibly have looked at it? How?
Oh, and I had people in the Department of Justice leaking information to my team of fraud and corruption that they had found and evidence of it because they couldn't get their higher-ups to do anything about it. They were trying to suppress it.
Yeah,
that's what Bill Barr was doing. The big lie is that this was a free and fair election, and the biggest liar in this election was Bill Barr.
Amen to that. There you have it. This, and also too, like I'll leave people with this, right? What kind of people? These are supposed to be the decent people. Forget about the Bush family, like starting wars, illegal, wars, whatever you want to call it. Whether you agree with Iraq or not, I think we can all agree now it was stupid. And there were no weapons of mass destruction. I don't really care who you blame this intelligence on, if you even believe that. Colin Powell knew at the time he was lying to the world when he gave that speech to the UN. They were spying on other member nations, delegates from other member nations who didn't go along with Colin Powell's speech because they were hoping to get dirt on them so they can then strong arm into supporting the resolution anyway. That is what they were doing. This is our government, folks, for you. And the British were helping. They were helping, by the way. But in any event, who uses... when John McCain died, even though he didn't like John McCain. When Poppy Bush died, even though he was not a fan of the Bushes, right? Trump was like, you know what? Do your thing. Do your thing. The Capitol is yours to celebrate the life of these people and the lives of these people. And he even invites, the former president over. That is when he was hit with, hey, listen, by the way, oh, thank you for everything. Thank you for, being so hospitable for the funeral. And thank you for your condolences. And by the way, you really want to make a gesture of good faith, you should pick this guy, Bill Barr. That's what they did to him at the White House. That is what they did. And I'll tell you what, I didn't even hear that damn name until people later, after, called me and said, look, this is what happened today. And I'm like, I knew Bill Barr. I knew of him, but it wasn't really like a name. He was Herbert Walker Bush's attorney general during that prison, crisis. That's what I remembered about Bill Barr. That's it, right? And, oh no, it was, you should have known the red flag right off the jump because everyone had the same thing to say. Oh no, he's an institutionalist. Oh, he cares more about the trust in the institution than he does about any one person or people in the institution. The institution itself, the welfare of it, its image comes before anything else. Okay, yeah, right. But in any event, my central question to you people is how decent can you be if you use the death of the patriarch in your family to push a scheme, part of what, because now what you're saying, Robert, I'm signed on to at this point. there was a lot of moving pieces here to get rid of this man. A lot of moving. When Russiagate failed and they couldn't take the Senate, and that would have been the easiest, most democratic way to get rid of him. And that didn't happen. Then all of these other pieces started to get put into place, to get rid of him. And Bill Barr was essential, obviously, not having an attorney general who was going to do their job. And folks, if you still think he was doing his job, it was just maybe 10 days before the election, and I got a copy of that order for Durham, and it was dated October. So here you had Fox News. I'm talking about October before the election. Here you have Fox News reporting about how they're rapidly expanding this investigation, and they did expand it one time before, but nothing like you were hearing. Right? And they're gonna go from now. It's more than just Mueller. It's even all the way to Peter Strzok and Crossfire Hurricane, and that was a load of crap because the expansion in the scope, the authority to expand the scope, right, into whatever. What was it for then, Robert? Leverage on whoever comes in power next? I mean, is that what's going on here? They're using the FBI to get leverage on their would-be political adversaries in the future? I mean, that's what they're using the FBI for. And is that scope, the expansion order was dated in October of 2020. So he had been blowing smoke all that whole entire time, man. And Uber, remember all that? Uber?
Gaslighting everybody, all the way across the board. Played Trump like a violin.
Yeah.
Knew Trump
got others to help. The Sean Hannitys of the world.
Yes.
I mean, don't you think he owes his audience, you said it before, don't you think he owes his audience a freaking apology? TikTok.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I mean, he gaslit. Remember, who was it who recommended John Bolton to Trump? Yeah. Sean Hannity.
Yeah.
And Hannity is not a reliable source. He's a Roger Ailes creation. He's not an organic, authentic, interesting, exciting personality. He never has been. He's a caricature of conservatism, not a representation of it, not a clear expression of it. He was almost a nobody when Roger Ailes picked him up. Roger Ailes manufactured the identity of Sean Hannity. Without Roger Ailes, there is no Sean Hannity. He's some small-time talk show host.
He gets on Donahue once and then fades away. Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, he wasn't the brightest bulb in the block ever. Tended to support whatever institutional conservative agenda. Remember, at one point, Sean Hannity was going to be part of supporting the Gang of Four's immigration proposal in 2014. He was involved in those meetings with Murdoch and others to get everybody on board. And then all of a sudden, the world got shook by what happened with Eric Cantor going down. And all of a sudden, Sean Hannity decided to shut his mouth about that.
Yeah.
But because they tried to recruit Rush Limbaugh to that, and Limbaugh said, no, thanks. And Limbaugh started also brutally attacking the Republican Institutional Party at the time. And that led to Limbaugh's really Trumpian. It was a return to the original Limbaugh. Limbaugh, late 80s, was actually a populist critic of Republican institutional politics. Then Poppy Bush played it smart, invited him to the White House, put on the personal pressure. And so and from that point forward, Limbaugh was as much of he was on the populist side, but he was not willing to criticize the institutional Republican Party that much at all until really 2014. And then after 2014, he started ripping. I mean, you started hearing deep state words that Limbaugh had not used in a long time or ever. You saw him. He started attacking the inside deals, started saying that they're just crony capitalists. So, talking about all of what's these wars are dumb and aren't have no positive. I mean, he was one of the biggest Iraqi war champions. By 2015, that Limbaugh had changed. That was a sign that if people were paying attention. But Hannity is usually late to the ball game, and that's obvious. I mean, right now he's running. Not only did he gaslight everybody about Barr, and then gaslight everybody about Durham, and then gaslight everybody about the Biden investigations that were right about to bust open, the Durham investigations that were right about to bust open, the election-related investigations that were right about to bust open. But he also, since then, now he has Pompeo on, and he keeps yipping and yaying about Russia like it's 2012 and it's Mitt Romney all over again.
We're going back to that now. Yeah, we are. A lot of people are. Can hear that.
I mean, the future of populist republicanism is Tucker Carlson, not Sean Hannity. That's the bottom line.
Yeah, and I think you see that. Really, you see that in the numbers. Otherwise, Sean would have been the flagship guy after Combs left all those years ago. And Allen obviously has since passed away now, but
Why did Trump pick Bill O'Reilly to do this little tour with? Of all the people that,
they've been
one, you have
friends
this
for a while, I think, haven't they? Though, right? They've been friends. I think him and Bill O'Reilly.
Oh yeah, no doubt. But it's a couple things. One, Bill O'Reilly has not been able to rebound much since he got sort of kicked out into.
He got Me Too'd, man. He got Me Too'd.
Yeah, exactly. And unlike even Glenn Beck, Glenn Beck took a while to get back. A lot of these people think they're big stars when they're really just whoever Fox is putting up at the time.
Yeah.
And most of these guys have disappeared after they leave Fox. And one of the main original Me Too people was someone who disappeared after she was no longer going to be promoted at Fox.
Yep.
So so some of these were Fox creations, and then you have people like Tucker Carlson, who was always who would be huge no matter where he was at. That's really not true with Sean Hannity. It could be true of Laura Ingraham, could be true of Greg Gutfeld, but it's not really true of almost anyone else at Fox. And that was proven when Bill O'Reilly kept claiming he was the reason they had the ratings they did. They replaced him with Tucker Carlson, and the ratings get bigger in both the key demographic and the overall demographic. Whereas O'Reilly gets very little attention. But like if I'm Trump, I get the idea with Bill O'Reilly does his history stuff and all that kind of thing. Look, Bill O'Reilly is somebody, I guess he plans on filling his audiences with 80-year-olds. Because that
is what he is. He's more of a historian than he ever was a journalist, Robert. He's like, he'll call himself a historian / journalist, but
he's
he really
your
is
old person's historian. You know what I mean?
He
He's not your Tucker Carlson, Darren Beatty at the Revolver
teacher.
Yeah, absolutely. He's if your grandparent was teaching you stuff, and a lot of his history is still, put this way, I'm not a big fan of it. A lot of it tends to be institutional narrative.
Yeah, there's a lot of
it's not really a Trumpian narrative. Trump doesn't really, Trump is on a much more populist side, and O'Reilly has tried to shift to be a little more populist, but, it's not his native instinct. He's a media personality who mostly appeals to 70-year-olds who want to hang out at Barnes and Noble still. And, God bless that crowd, but is that really Trump's future politically? You want to go on the old person's the old person's tour. I thought there could have been Dave Rubin, for example. If he was going to do a tour, what Jordan Peterson did. A Dave
Get
Rubin
out of the box. Yeah.
That would pop. You saw the easy chemistry they had right on their interview.
Yeah.
Somebody like that, not somebody. Also, given O'Reilly's issues.
They had a great interview. Dave, you did a great job. I've only heard one person interview Donald Trump that good before, and that's Don Smith of the Don Smith Show. His interview with Donald Trump was so serious and informed, and it was like Trump, but serious because they were talking about serious content. But then you had Trump being Trump himself, who he really is, being like you saw him with Dave, being funny and personable and just seeming to have fun. Back to being the happy warrior kind of cheerleader for America kind of thing. I totally agree with what you said before. He's not great at all this other stuff, man. He just isn't. No. He's a good cheerleader. That was his secret. Which is why the
other thing with the Bill O'Reilly thing is, given Bill O'Reilly's Me Too problems and the accusations that linger against Trump, I think they're all bogus. But do you want that public association out there?
Yeah.
Because Bill O'Reilly's Me Too allegations, they're on tape. They were embarrassing, frankly. They were some of the dumbest form of sexual harassment I think I've ever heard. It was just, but it was also
style. That's that style, man, and that that generation.
Yeah, very much. Just the kind of statements you expect from a 15-year-old teenage boy. You know what I mean? Talking about a lot of things.
Well, don't you get lazy when you get that rich and that, don't you just start to get lazy with picking up women? You're just like, look. And you just say dumb stuff and you don't think it matters. You could say in
certain respects, Bill O'Reilly was a man after Roger Ailes' own heart.
Yeah.
And I like Roger Ailes, but there was one area of his life that was, not Weinstein-esque, but came from a different time period. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, man, let's be real. Because there is one of the girls.
He was clearly a sexual harasser.
Yeah,
there's just no doubt about either one of them.
One of the girls that that was very pro-Trump. I'm not going to get into it. I don't tell her stories. She's not even really around anymore. But I heard some of those stories. It was speaking of an interview. I was in the queue, in the green, waiting, and this particular person was telling her story, and it just had Roger Ailes written all over it, man. It did. You knew she wasn't lying, and first of all, she's a very attractive woman. So here you have this this slime ball. Like, look, sure, you want more airtime? No problem. I got a little time between 7 and 8. Did you come up to the top floor? That's what it consisted of, and it sounded very real. It did. It just sounded very.
And I had heard those
legit.
stories for many, many years.
Yeah, because you heard them, right? It was an open secret. Let's get real.
It was like Harvey Weinstein stories, though the scale of Harvey Weinstein stories didn't come out. I mean, I went to a Kentucky Derby party early 2000s with some people that were celebrating leaving the Harvey Weinstein company, which I found odd. I was like, man, this guy's got massive success. Why are you guys so? And they wouldn't talk about it. It was clear the vibe. I was like, oh, there's some serious problems with Harvey. So, I mean, a lot of these stories, there's a reason they circulate in the way they do. And that's another reason why I'm like, it tells me whoever Trump is still around does not have anywhere near Trump's instincts to guide him politically. I mean, Rumble's a good move, despite Gab's complaints. I mean, look, I like Andrew Torba. I understand he's doing great, trying to do very independent free speech work. He has a bunch of racists on his platform. That's just reality. Trump doesn't want to be associated with a bunch of Jew haters and fascists and bigots. So, I get, Andrew, you want to be a pure free speech guy. God bless. Understand the consequences are some people don't want to have to deal with a bunch of real bigots every day. That's just reality. A lot of, but that's why I'm not on Gab. It's why do I want to deal with constant trolling? I'm sorry. That's why Locals is 10 times better.
Yeah, I'm on it, but
Locals.
I haven't used it in so long, man. It never was for me. It just wasn't.
And I don't. This is not a bash. Torba's made a conscious choice to support pure free speech. God bless. But understand, but don't complain about the consequences, is my thing. Is don't complain that some people don't want to associate with the brand because you've made a conscious choice to allow this group of people to have as loud a voice as they can have. That's your right. That's your entitlement. But also accept the consequences from a marketing perspective that come with that. It would not help Trump to be on Gab. It just wouldn't. It would hurt Trump. So there, I don't blame Trump at all for saying, look, if you'll do something to curb all the trolls and bigots, not necessarily restricting their speech, but something that just, so they at least don't stalk, don't harass, so on and so forth, then I'll be on Gab. But if not, then I won't. And so I think that was a correct decision.
That's why I love Locals. And I don't know why Donald Trump doesn't get on Locals, because of course, even someone like him, you're going to get someone who pays $5, whatever it may be that he charges.
Well, the advantage is Locals is pure free speech. It doesn't discriminate against Locals itself. Won't ban any speech that doesn't that's within the First Amendment protections. But we can curtail our speech on the creator can decide what speech is allowed. Yeah. So I'm not going to allow hateful speech, people attacking people being uncivil, because that's my right. It's my bar. And that's the genius of Locals. It allows you to have pure, full free speech as much as you want, but also allows you to have some control and discipline over your board, and you're not responsible and accountable for what other Locals communities are doing. Yeah, and that's where Locals, frankly, is an improvement technologically on Gab.
And it just naturally filters out the nonsense, anyway, the toxicity that you'll get on other social media platforms. It does. We have our community is thinking people. They're very diverse, very thoughtful, very deliberate. And it's to the point now where maybe you still are there with what I do. You're still there to educate people on how this stuff is done, but the level of understanding is far beyond the average news consumer who is reading a poll when Fox News puts it up on their television. Or they are far more informed about what it is they're being told something means and whether or not that's sound or right. They're at the point where they can even look at something and kind of vet it. What kind of assumptions did the pollster make or whatever it may be. The way Locals is set up, you're not going to get a whole, it's happened, but it doesn't happen often. You're not going to get a whole lot of people who sign up to be paid interacting members and they troll you, or they just add nonsense to the conversation. Our experience has been
you have to pay the toll if you want to troll. And
I love that.
And it turns out that very few people do, and the few that do are mostly the more good-natured trolls.
Yes.
So, they'll be sarcastic or sardonic, but not mean, not vicious, not nasty, not a bunch of Nick Fuentes types.
And I do tell people I want disagreeers. So if you disagree and we can have a conversation, that has turned into very productive debate on our channel and on even our live chat when we're doing a video.
Oh, yeah.
Or something.
I mean, on our locals community, we get, I get 300 posts a day and over 1,000 comments a day. And often there'll be some, good civil disagreement and discussion and dialogue.
Yeah. That's good.
In fact,
and that's what
I
it's
have
all
a live
supposed to be about.
Going right now, actually.
You got any questions from it? If people want to interact, tell them go ahead. And in the meantime, let's blaze through some of this data while Robert's fishing through some questions. And I also want your take on the Brazilian race. Look, guys, we got some funny numbers over here. I will make note that last time people didn't see Bolsonaro winning that much of the vote the first time around, but this is pretty significant difference here. Let me pop this up on the screen.
Yeah. I mean, it's two things have happened. One is Bolsonaro wasn't really, he tried, but he failed to manage it's a mistake of Populist in multiple places and locations. He tried to contain the issues related to the lockdown, didn't control regional governments, and kind of went back and forth on how to manage it and was unsuccessful. I mean, if he'd just taken a hardline Swedish style position all the way through, but trying to play in between got him the worst of both worlds. That's part one. Part two is he promised a major success on crime and economics, and in part the pandemic and the lockdown response to it crushed both of those things that he was trying to build. And then part three is now for politicized reasons. Lula was really, the judicial system was politicized. While there was good, legitimate questions about his corruption, the way those cases were handled were Rudy Giuliani style, in like what they're doing in New York Court of Appeals, were clearly politically corrupted. And so since he has been ultimately found innocent of a lot of those charges, the judicial corruption against him has actually made him more popular now than he was before all of that. And the last component is where Lula is strong is it comes from a left populist perspective. Still populist. It happens to be on the left, but he embraces a lot of populism. And in Latin America, a lot of populism leans left because so much of their natural wealth is controlled by foreign oligarchs. And that's why they're, the sort of capital, the right-leaning populism tends to be rooted in security and culture and local entrepreneurialism, but it has limits because it tends to be in bed with the big Western corporate interests that often undermine domestic working class well-being.
Yeah, I would say too. That's exactly when you look at the overlap in the vote. What was the vote share for Bolsonaro's party last time versus what we're seeing now? Where's that coming from? It's that overlap where there's just a lot actually in this country. It's a lot, I think, probably more than in the United States, where there was that Bernie Trump overlap, right, in 2016. And I think in 2020, Trump just took Bernie's voters. Those voters, I think he just took them.
I mean, what you have in Brazil is about twice as many. The ratio to Bernie to Trump type voters is 2 to 1.
Yeah, it's got to be like 2 to 1.
And Bolsonaro was able to win almost all those Bernie type voters last time. Yeah. He's losing almost all of them this time.
Yeah, he's getting crushed this time. And they just been drumming this guy. They've been drumming him since the moment he got in office. Yep. They've been drumming his kids, his sons. You want to follow what I mean by that? Look at Glenn Greenwald's Twitter page. I mean, there's daily wax at Bolsonaro.
Greenwald, what they did to Trump, they did to Bolsonaro. Yeah. They just had more success because Bolsonaro is not as skilled as Trump in the court of public opinion, wasn't able to achieve some of the results that Trump achieved in terms of delivering on policy promises, but had all the vulnerabilities of Trump in terms of who he appointed, his ability to control what the states were doing, his response to the lockdowns, his mistakes in certain personnel, all of that, he had more limitations. And then Lula's like, Bernie Sanders combined with a Kennedy. I mean, it's a different. He's at a much higher level. Not only are there a lot more Bernie type voters in Brazil because of the legacy of right wing fascism that was strong in Brazil, the dictatorship for over 20 years, killed a lot of people on the left, was done part of Operation Condor that took over all of Latin America after the mid 1960s for the most part, that embedded American interest, American corporate interest with fascistic elements, including, Operation Condor. The United States recruited Klaus Barbie, the famous Nazi, to go down and train people to do torture camps, embedded them with pedophile rings and other things. You can look this up about a story about where one of the torture camps was a pedophile community from ex-Nazi pedophile community in Latin America. That legacy has continued to hurt conservatism and right-leaning populism in Latin America, because Brazil, at one point had a strong right populist movement that Bolsonaro reinvigorated. Argentina with Perón, part of that was right-wing populism, but it got corrupted by its being in bed with Nazi fascists. Tens of thousands of Nazis ended up throughout Latin America thanks to these people. And it's the legacy of Cold War American politics, the Dulles brothers. That's where the devil's chessboard is behind me right there, about the Dulles brothers. That's a gift from a local subscriber about the real story behind the killing of Osama bin Laden. It hit Zero Dark 30 is 90% fraud. The CIA had almost nothing to do with it. They're just covering up for their torture and their ineptitude. But I think what we're seeing in Latin America is populism is still very, very strong. You're not seeing any of these centrist, neoliberal, neoconservative, corporatist types, globalist types. None, that's not succeeding anywhere in Latin America, but it's leaning to the left in part because of the recent history, in part because of the political nature, and in part because of the economics of the circumstances down there. Yeah. And last but not least, because of the failures of Trump, you could amplify times 10 for Bolsonaro in Brazil. And that may be a good transition. We're seeing some of the same failures by Le Pen in France that showed up in the most recent regional elections.
Yeah, where was the last? I didn't put that one in. I just had the latest polling from that. But
basically she got crushed. Yeah. Now so did Macron. I predicted it. I bet money on Macron winning early on in 2017 at a 4-to-1 rate of return on that bet. But I said at the time, I'm betting on Macron now, and I'll bet against him next time because I don't think he'll ever win. The bigger story out of the French regional elections is that Macron's party is completely crushed.
Yep.
The second story is that Le Pen is in trouble. Le Pen's party is in trouble. I think the results of that election, watch for the French elites to dump Macron in the next 6 months and choose a pro-EU so-called conservative, I think his name is Bernier, to replace Macron because Le Pen has opened a door by trying to tone down the populist portion of her voice.
Yeah, they had an identity crisis. Crisis, Robert. They were trying to run away from the old man. They were just, it's an identity. You can't, I say this all the time. I don't know what other way to convey this to people, but parties, messages, you cannot have conflicting tones, tenures, even messaging platforms, what you stand for at its core. You can't have an identity crisis in the middle of an election. You simply can't do that. And you got to give it to leftists and statists. You got to give it to them. They don't. They don't ever.
Oh, yeah. They know how to continually manipulate. The path there has been there for, history gives a clue as to the path, and particularly in France, large aspects of what de Gaulle did give a lot of indicators of how you can be successful as sort of a populist nationalist in France. And that's the path Le Pen should follow. And she's made the mistake that you can disassociate from your father's fascistic friends without disassociating from your populist base. And there was a path forward by embracing de Gaulle style, a kind of French populism could reinvigorate her, especially as being the anti-Macron, with Macron's completely collapsing popularity, which started almost right away. It was in the 30s. That now he's in the 20s, wherever it is. But by not articulating a policy platform, it's the weakness a lot of these populists face is not creating. Not many of them have the skill set. Well, none of them have the marketing skill set of Trump. And in order to substitute for that, or even to supplement some of Trump's own weaknesses, is you need architects and engineers to design a policy agenda that can substantively translate populism into actual outcomes. And the outside of the foreign policy arena, Trump was very inconsistent in that area. It's still a vulnerability. Bolsonaro mostly failed to deliver, got stuck in the lockdown logic that killed him, even though he tried to fight back just unsuccessfully and inconsistently. And Le Pen is running into the same problem. While disassociating from her father was a key step, the bridge was to embrace a populist path, not to just appease the establishment. And that's where she misread that dynamic, and now her party's in trouble.
Yeah, I gotta tell you too, though. I mean, that there's like equivocating between the lockdown and not lockdown. Maybe I'll do a little so I get the media heat off me. I don't want to look like I'm anti-science. Well, a lot of them, I mean, this can bring us to the economy and some of the economic stuff. A lot of them didn't realize the impact, and of course, this is going to fall on their. If they lost. And like, with the instance of Trump, this, of course, is eventually going to fall on Biden's shoulders. It is. I can already see some of that. But the CPI in this country is a really bad red flag here. And it's not just because now it's starting to get in individual sectors.
And this is the government CPI.
This is the government's,
this is not like shadow stat CPI, which would be about 4 times higher.
Absolutely, without a doubt. This is the full index, and I just wanted to show that so you can get an idea how far you have to go back 4 decades, folks, to see jumps like we are seeing now under Biden. Here's the year to date, just so people understand. That's the full. Let me bring up the year to date. Where are we on here? Come on now. There we go. Here's the year to date. All right, so these kinds of gains, first of all, it's way outpacing wage growth. I mean, this is no bueno. Okay, it's complete. It's like 4 times the size of the month over month, not the 12-year annualized rate, the month over month. And that's not, honestly, I don't know how long they can keep that up, man. I really don't, because we're seeing it here. Like, for instance, where does this go? If you're trying to buy a house and you've been trying to save up to buy a house, the cost of lumber is through the roof. We are actually seeing some projects shut down because the builder kind of wants to push people out. It's in their interest to do it. So 6 months ago, they may have said it would cost X, Y, and Z. But now, because vinyl siding is 4 times what it was before, and lumber is 3.5 times what it was before, 4 times the amount, they can't do it anymore, Robert. And we are seeing projects get halted and shut down, and the price of a home is through the roof. And it helps certain people, So if you were like me and you did it before this happened, I mean, that's great for you, but it stinks for your neighbor. When you got to go tell your neighbor the disparity between what you paid and what they paid. And both of your houses are obviously going to be, roughly the same. House prices or home prices. This is the home price index. I was going to grab mine, but the one you sent actually showed it better because mine was so condensed going back that far. It didn't really show you a better, more aggregate way of looking at it. So, I mean, what is this? You look at this, what does this say to you, Robert?
I mean, what's amazing is that what people forget is that house prices were relatively stable for a long time.
Yep.
And then they got out of control between 2000 and 2007. But now we're at higher peaks than we were at the highest peak of the last home pricing bubble. But but as you know, the underlying things that go into a house price are going up in basic supplies, certain forms of labor, just the land costs are going up dramatically. So you have that factor. You have other underlying aspects that are causing inflation. And then you have potential counteractive deflationary components, which is what happens if infrastructure ends up being a very small bill, if the STEMI checks run out and the unemployment compensation checks run out supplement checks run out by September, if all of a sudden the evictions start happening in September, if all of a sudden the home mortgage foreclosures come back. So, I mean, we have these competing factors going on, but what it feels like is something in between the 1940s on price shocks that we got in the 1940s. This is Lynn Alden's argument that we're going to see inflation spike, then it go down, then another spike, then it go down. It's going to, and then like 1970s stagflation subcomponents, we're also seeing signs of that. But either way, we're seeing signs of a very chaotic economy coming. The prediction that people had made that a Biden is going to enjoy this huge economic boom. Everybody's going to be thrilled. They're going to go out and celebrate life again. All this is supposed to happen this week. Remember, July 4th, there was going to be no more lockdowns, no more mask mandates, back to normal. That's what Biden predicted a few months ago.
Yep.
He said by the end of this week, and that the economy would be booming in a healthy way. Not these asset bubble spikes all over the place, not inflation taking place,
that's right.
Not inability to get basic wages and labor. I mean, there's just more and more stories of people. I mean, what's fascinating is, I was watching that, the new version of the Rising, which they're now on Sagar and Crystal, but they had that Washington Post economics guy who was talking about climate change. And this is a good bridge into infrastructure. I think George Gammon is right. If the goal is to continue to flood the market with money,
well, I think we lost Robert for a hot second. I'll disconnect and reconnect. That's how we always do. It happens once in a while. He'll pop off, but I'll get him. I think he's coming back right now, as a matter of fact. If the goal is to pump it with money, is where Robert left off with that. But while I wait for him to hop back on, and it does look like he's having like a little bit of a wait connection. But the bottom line is, you can't do this forever. You can't do this forever. What they're saying, and I was going to tell him this. Anyone who filed their taxes already, you did it already. Maybe you do it through H&R Block, whoever you do it from. Basically, if you have children, they're going to pump out another stimulus, and you can get, depending on what your prior credits were. I'm not going to get in my personal situation, but we don't get tax credits, don't offset what we got to, what we pay, and that's whatever, that's fine. But I would rather them not, with all of this inflation spiking, everything we're seeing, I would rather them not send out another $600 or $1,200 or $1,500. Just keep it. You want to do that. You want to do infrastructure. You want to revise the tax code again to undo the Trump tax cuts, which, by the way, ended in surpluses, or not surplus, but basically it generated more revenue than expected, which helped to offset deficits, which is what I meant. Still, Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, and defense are growing at such ridiculously high rates. We can't just cut our way out. We can't cut our way out. We have to grow and cut our way out of it. There's just no other way. But if you're going to end up doing this bill, and he may have killed it, for those who don't know, it could be a smaller bill like Robert was talking about, because Biden had a deal with Republican senators who planned, look, if you're a Republican voter, hear me and hear me clear. They were going to screw you. Don't let them play stupid, the little Lindsey Graham run the Politico, act all tough. Oh, they made us look stupid. Now it's dead, because he did this to us. They didn't expect Joe to have a senile moment and blurt out that he was going to come back and roll Republicans for the rest of it. And it was only contingent on them rolling over that he would sign the skinnier version. They know. These are people who have been around for a long time. Lindsey Graham has been around for a very long time. You think he didn't know? Come on. You think these people have no idea? They're so folks, they're so full of crap. They only ran to any time the Republican establishment wants to do two things: attack an outsider, a conservative, populist or a conservative, or they want to clean up a mess. They run to Politico. That's their go-to. That's Mitch McConnell's go-to. Lindsey Graham's go-to. If they want to do something like attack Rand Paul, attack Ted Cruz, or clean up a mess to make it sound better than it really was. They totally intended to do you dirty. Absolutely, without a doubt. And they'll still do it. Because believe you me, they're going to get rewarded for supporting the bill. Their people, their benefactors are going to get rewarded. This is why Mitch McConnell wanted to stay the majority leader, but he wanted Donald Trump gone. Because whatever you thought about Donald Trump, business was not as usual, was not operating as usual on K Street. It just wasn't. And they were dying to get rid of that guy so it could go back to the dirty little rent-seeking behavior that they, the rent-seeking relationships, reciprocity that they have going on over there. So, Lindsey Graham's a hell of an actor, boy. Let me tell you. How many people did Lindsey Graham, speaking of the Durham investigation, speaking of all the, all these people are going to have charges filed on them for what they did to Trump? Please. Even do a fifth of what Adam Schiff would have done in the House when he led a committee? Do a fifth of what Mark Warner would have done if he led that committee? Well, he did lead it. Burr was a pushover. Come on. Lindsey Graham didn't do anything. He went on Hannity. He blew smoke up everybody's butt. That's all he did. All right, let me see if I can bring Robert back on here. All right, Robert. I can't hear you, my friend. Let's see. No, I think his connection is bad or something. It looks like he's there, but his camera went off. You know what? I'll try to send him another one. I'll give it a second, one more time. Try to reconnect it for him. If I can't, I'll try to send him another one. But if not, we'll have to take it out. All right. Let me bear with me. Yeah, he's texting. Bear with me. It disconnected. We'll send a new one, Robert. Hold tight, buddy. Live streaming, folks. Live streaming. I think what I got to do is just reconnect it all together. All right. Let's start a new one. Boom. All right, Robert. Coming your way, buddy. Coming your way. Hot second, okay? Dun, dun. I assume he wants to say goodbye. Tell you all where he can find him. But while I'm this loading up, don't fall for that Lindsey Graham crap. That's such a load. Such a load of crap. All right, Robert, coming your way, buddy. There we go. All right, in the meantime, I was hoping you could grab some questions. Laura was not here to field the live chat for us. She is on her way back today, and I want to say an extra day. What can you do? Dad has to go. Dad has to work, but that's life. I'll make it up. I'll make it up to the kid eventually. We're fishermen. I'll take him somewhere. Take him on a trip or something, and we'll see. We'll see if he can't beat me again. Very first time I take this kid last year. Very first time I take him bass fishing, and the kid just kills it. I mean, we both had a great day, but I had to tell him this is not normal. You don't catch largemouth like this one after the other. Smallest fish, 4.5, 5 pounds. And he did beat me with just under a 10-pounder. He beat me at the very last 15 minutes of the trip. Last 15 minutes. And I was happy. I was actually really glad that he beat me. Because I wanted him to have the prize fish for the day. And he did. He got me by like maybe 3/4 of a pound. Because an hour and a half before I caught a monster. And you can't replace those memories, folks. You really can't. I got that fight on video. I watch that fight at least once a month or once every few weeks. It's just something else. And kids grow up quick. But look on his face, reeling this monster in was too much. All right. Look, I don't know. It's about 12:02. We'll give Robert a couple more minutes. Totally understand if he can't get it back, but I tried to send him another one. We'll see. All right, but in the meantime, let's talk about what we're going to do this week. Coming up on Inside the Numbers on Wednesday, we're going to go over North Carolina. All right, for the locals community, you may look at North Carolina and you may say, wow, that looks a little Democratic to me. Yeah, but we're going to go over the history of it because it used to be double digit. And this is why pollsters repeatedly blow North Carolina, even though it's getting much closer. And we're going to show you exactly where these voters who claim to be Democrats don't vote Democrat at the federal level. That's still one of those states where Republicans did make a lot of gains by simply cannibalizing those voters and getting them to change their registration, just like we saw them do in Florida under Barack Obama. But it's still there. And this time around, in 2020, The argument from the Biden plus 6 people in North Carolina, Biden plus whatever in North Carolina, their argument was that transition was over. That those white Democrats in the southern and southwestern, particularly too, part of the state, they're gone now. Age is either taking them or they registered at Republican. That's simply not true, and we'll show you that's not true. All right, they're just not reaching these people because these are among the hardest people to reach. And when you poll, you'll get a ton out of Fayetteville. You'll get a ton out of Durham, Raleigh, Wake County. It's going to want to talk to you like crazy. But you will not reach the rest of those people unless you really spend time out there in the field and hit them with mixed modes. And you need a large sample. North Carolina is getting much more diverse. And black voters are more conservative in North Carolina than in many other even southern states where they vote overwhelmingly Democratic. Mississippi, they vote overwhelmingly Democratic, and whites vote overwhelmingly Republican. North Carolina is not like that. It is not at all uncommon to get a number in North Carolina that's like 20% for a Republican candidate. 20% support among the black community. And they are more conservative, so it does make sense. And some pollsters blow that off, or they'll get like basically low single-digit support for certain Republican candidates. Just that's a red flag. I actually saw one this last time where it's almost zero. You really messed up, and your geography is really messed up. Some people are very underrepresented. If you ever get numbers like that for a block of the population that can make up a fifth of the electorate or more. All right? And this time it was less about what the makeup racially of North Carolina was going to be and more about education and income levels. Because that can tell you where the crossover is. Yeah, they may say they're a Democrat, they may be registered. But if they make $30,000 to $75,000, they self-identify as either moderate or conservative, and they live in a certain part of that state, they are very likely to be a crossover vote. All right, so Republicans, for all the talk of doomsday and early voting, Republicans did get out their vote, and they did get that crossover, and that helped offset the loss they took among independents, who, by the way, are just becoming less independent now. They're just more liberal. And some people that may shift back in the short term to even midterm. That may flip around again because that's what typically happens under an incumbent president. The incumbent cannibalizes their other independent vote. But we don't know yet. It's too early to see. If you're a member of the locals community right now, peoplespundit.locals.com, and you're looking at these voter analysis models we're running and showing you right off the voter files, it hasn't started to happen yet. Almost every single state has moved toward the right that we've looked at so far. Almost every single one. Even Virginia. And it's an inference model, but they're still pretty accurate. That is not typical. Not typical at all. All right, so it doesn't look like Robert can reconnect here, so I'm going to pitch it for him. I'm not as good as he is, but I'm going to give it a chance. All right? He's got him and Viva have a lot of great content on their locals community. So if you enjoy this, you'll enjoy some of the clips you saw. VivaBarnesLaw.locals.com. Sorry, Robert, I did the best I could. Hey, VivaBarnesLaw.locals.com. All right, and of course mine is peoplespundit.locals.com. All right, we're gonna start with North Carolina, and we'll take a look at some of the other states a little bit later on Friday. And because we did miss my little Zooms last Friday getting ready for the trip, maybe we'll try to fit something in, even if it's short, and we just go over what I wanted to go over with on Friday, and we didn't get a chance to. All right, so maybe it'll be a shortened version of what we typically do. All right. So with that, I'm gonna give us out of here with Highway. Always a special thanks to the Bowen Band for Bowen for the theme song. And guys, if you like the videos, like them right there on YouTube. Hit the thumbs up button, and of course, subscribe to the channel, which has now changed from People's Pundit Daily to just People's Pundit. YouTube is just, if you had a hard time finding the channel, and you use a direct link, it's because it is now just People's Pundit on the URL. All right, we didn't change the name, but the URL. And we're probably going to change the name at some point in the future. All right, but if you like it, subscribe, hit the notification bell. That'll let you know when we're going to go live. All right, I'm out. All the best, folks. We'll see you on Wednesday. No wonder I'm hungry, folks. It's 4 o'clock.